Hey, good evening. It's normal for me to start this way. I want to see if everything's working. If not, I'm going to have to restart. I'm seeing some internet speed issues, so I hope everything's okay. So if you're in chat and you're watching, let me know if it's okay or not okay. So is it looking okay? Is it sounding okay? Or is it stuttering and messing up? Okay, that's good. It's okay. Let me just see. It might be freezing a little bit. I don't know. It was freezing on my end before I started, and it was annoying the heck out of me. So let's just see how it's doing on speed. And I can't see your comments while I do this. So hang in there. Welcome to Freedom Speech and You. I'm your host, Ken, who is not happy with one of his computers tonight because it should be going faster than this. I may just have to restart it because I'm not happy with that speed at all. Because I have a feeling it's going to stutter through the show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video that I made for you earlier on a different podcast that I do. And the reason I'm going to do that is because it's going to tell you about the launch tonight that's actually delayed down to, if I can find it, should be there. It's actually delayed to the end of the launch window. So let me get this thing set up. And then I can restart the other computer, I hope. And stop worrying about whether it's going to work right or wrong. No, that's not what I want. I want to share the video. So this is the video that I made earlier. I'm going to put myself down at the bottom of the screen here real quick. Take the brand logo out here for a second so you can see the other logo in the background, sort of, kind of. And I'm going to play that and see if I can restart this thing and make it work right. So hang on. Where are you? Yeah, you're in the video. Hey, good evening and welcome to Slightly Off Axis Podcast. I'm Ken Otto, your host. Hey, we've got something on top for you tonight. We have SpaceX coming up tonight with a Falcon Heavy Launch. There will be a lot of sites that will cover this launch, and I will be covering this on my other podcast that happens during the launch window time. So stay tuned, and I will give you information for that. Hello, Karen. Welcome. So what do we have on tap for tonight? Well, we have SpaceX. We have Falcon Heavy. They have tried multiple times to launch this rocket. They have had bad weather. We had bad weather today in Florida, as a matter of fact, but that bad weather is gone. The estimated launch Weather was 80% favorable with yesterday's forecast. I will check shortly. I didn't check before the broadcast to see if they updated that number yet, but I will check shortly on that. But what is tonight's launch? It's called Viasat 3 Americas, and it is a satellite launch. If I had more detail on my phone here, I would be able to tell you all the particulars, but there are plenty of places that are going to do that. Oh, it's 41 and raining up there where you are. Okay. It's in the 80s here in Florida. Not exactly sure what the humidity is, but I will get that kind of information when I do Freedom Speech and you later, which is coming up at 7 o'clock Eastern. But I was going to give you all the times for the rocket launch in the different time zones. So if you're watching from around the world and you just happen chanced on this by finding it on social media, the rocket launch in GMT time opens at 11:29. That's when the opportunity opens up tonight, 11:29 p.m. That's 23:29 UTC. If you have trouble with AM and PM, now you know it's near the end of the day. So it opens up at that time on April 30th, or 30 April, as they say around Europe. And it closes at 12:26 a.m. in GMT, or 0026 UTC on 01 May. So, hey, Nathaniel, welcome. So that's the world time if you're doing the time conversion. Locally, it's happening at 7:29 p.m. here on the Space Coast around Kennedy Space Center. And this is a launch coming from LC-39A, the traditional Kennedy Space Center pad that has served both the Apollo program and the Space Shuttle program and various missions for SpaceX, including all of the crewed missions. So all of the missions that SpaceX launches that have crew go off 39A. Artemis was on the adjacent 39B, and a lot of the uncrewed missions that SpaceX does, they jump back and forth between 39A at Kennedy Space Center or SLC-40 at what's known as Cape Canaveral. Almost said Cape Kennedy by mistake. Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That's a mouthful, or as we say, CCSFS. Now, that is the original launching area that is back from before when Kennedy Space Center was built. And that launched a large variety of rockets. It's going to continue to launch a lot of rockets. So we said 7:29 p.m. and closes at 8:26 p.m. locally. For those of you in Central Time, or those of you, who are watching from Houston or places like that, it's 6:29 p.m. to 7:26 p.m. So that's what you got going on. And for those of you in Mountain Time, I actually had somebody retweet my Mountain Time, so I'm actually going to say that. I was beginning to think that no one ever was watching in Mountain Time. Mountain Time is 5:29 p.m. to 6:26 p.m. And Pacific Time viewers, we're talking about 4:29 p.m. to 5:26 p.m., which includes those of you in Arizona, except for those of you who live in Navajo County, because those of you who live in Navajo County are on Mountain Time. And Hawaii, the bulk of Hawaii, although I do understand there's another time zone there, it would be 1:29 p.m. to 2:26 p.m. So that gives you all the time frames if you're looking at me to help you figure out when is this rocket launch going up, because people do get really excited about Falcon Heavy. Starship is obviously going to be the most powerful rocket, Artemis before that. And so all of that is going on. And but Falcon Heavy at the moment, for orbital rockets that actually deliver payloads, is the only viable, really powerful rocket. So the area is likely to be full of people. Now, if you're watching online, and you just want to watch the rocket launch, how do you do that? Well, you go to YouTube, you go to @SpaceX, spelled just like it sounds, @ symbol, and my camera is reversed, so I just drew the @ symbol in reverse. My camera is reversed because it's so much easier for me to orient myself and see myself as though I'm looking in a selfie. So just imagine that I'm drawing the @ symbol correctly. @ symbol, SPACEX. That's how you get to SpaceX. And when you get there, it looks like this. And so if I use the right mouse pointer, you'll see that it looks like this. And you'll see that they have highlights on there, and they have some advertising, but they also have what are referred to as highlights, or I think it gives a different name on it. What it really means is the featured. That's the word I was looking for. These are the featured videos by SpaceX. And when you're looking for a live is a featured video. So here it is. I will expand this so you can see it. And I will bump my camera down to the bottom here. So maybe now you can really see it. There. Okay. You see that below the SpaceX logo and the subscribe button, there is VSAT-3 America's mission. That's tonight's mission. Okay. Now, you'll notice that even though I told you it was 7:29 and I said we were going from 7:29 to 8:26, you notice how now it says scheduled for 8:15? More than likely, that means that they changed the time. So when you go to the video description, you'll see these 3 little dots. Open that up. Dismiss that. Okay, you see that chat is disabled for the live stream, and you'll see that they have a description down here. Okay. They've not updated the description, so according to the description, it's still happening at 7:29, but let's go look at the tweet, shall we? Let's go look at the tweet. So let me find Twitter on this computer. Okay. Let me share this tab instead. I'm going to shrink back down to normal size so that I can see all of the functionality of Twitter. I'm going to search for SpaceX at SPACEX. Oops, got caps lock on, don't need that. Okay, and here they're saying, so they have not changed the anything. And they have not directly tweeted a change in time. They're still just showing stuff about that. Did they change? Okay, they have a thread here. Okay. Here at 41 minutes ago, they say team is resetting the countdown clock to the end of the launch window due to ground winds. They're targeting 8:26 p.m. for tonight's liftoff. So all those times I gave you before, 8:26 p.m. Eastern, 7:26 Central, 6:26 Mountain, 5:26 Pacific, 2:26 Hawaii, and for world time, it's going to be 12:26 a.m. on May the 1st, not April the 30th, because we, in their time, go into the next day with GMT, and it's 0026 UTC. They're targeting the end of the window tonight for the launch. So now you know. Now you're not going to be sitting around waiting, wondering when's this thing going to go up. They're either going to do it at the end of the window tonight or not. And this is the reason why they're going to do it. And let's expand that and make that viewable. Okay. So this is the reason why they're going to be delaying to the end of the window. It says, and I quote, "Team is resetting the clock to the end of the launch window due to ground winds." So that's what they're doing. So now you know. Okay. So I will be doing Freedom Speech and You at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So sometime in the middle of my show, I will be doing, coverage of this. I can't do both simultaneously because I can only do one show at a time. So I will show you how to get to Freedom Speech and You. So let me do that. So let me take this out. Let me solo myself. Show you how to get to Freedom Speech and You on various platforms. So I could point you to my website, but the one thing about pointing you to my website is that doesn't help people that don't have themselves logged into the browser versions of every website. They'll just get confused. So if you want to watch my coverage and you want to tune in instead of just tuning in directly to SpaceX, which my social media tells you how to get to SpaceX. You can do that. You won't be able to have any discussions or commentary, but you also won't get involved in a show that discusses politics if that's not your cup of tea. So that's why I tell you this. So let me bring this in. If you want to watch my other show, Freedom Speech and You, okay, Freedom Speech and You is Freedom Speech and You podcast by Kenneth Otto, and it's on at Freedom Speech and You at YouTube. So that's the YouTube way to get there. Now, the people that were watching earlier, you're Facebookers. So I think it's the same way on Facebook. Let me see. Because I was able to use certain parameters, but different sites. Yes. Okay. So on Facebook, let me share this tab instead. It's Freedom Speech and You also, and I will put it in chat so that you can read what it is. So on Facebook, I will be on this Facebook page. On YouTube, if you're in the app, you just put the app part of this in there. But if you're getting there from the browser via YouTube, then you come in with this link on YouTube. Okay. And I will also be on the Twitch platform. And on the Twitch platform, it's this link. And on the Twitch platform, it looks like this. And the music sounds like that when the show starts. But that's enough of that, because obviously if you're not into politics, you don't want to watch that show. And if you're not into politics, you want to go back to the YouTube link that I showed you earlier, or just at SpaceX on YouTube. Okay. But again, now you know what time the launch is going to be. And I'm really happy that I was able to do this update for you. And I hope it helps you find tonight's information however you want to find it. And this is the kind of podcast that I'm going to be doing for Slightly Off Axis. I'm going to discuss things like this related to actual rocket launches from now on. I was doing a podcast that was about space history, and I was interviewing people, but I wasn't getting anybody that really wanted to do interviews. Now, maybe, who knows? Things could change, and I could get people saying, hey, you seem to know, how to talk to people really nicely, and I'd like to do an interview with you. Or I may have some of the approximately 8 people that I talked to before. And when I say 8 people, I'm counting the last group of people as a people, but there were actually 5 people in that group. So we're really talking, let's see, I talked to 7 people. One of them is deceased. So we're talking 10 people. I could have just said 10 people. Anyway, the podcast is going to be about the rocket launches, the ones that have succeeded, the ones that have failed, the things that go on, the schedule of the launches, the rescheduling of the launches, telling people what time the launches are so that they know wherever they're watching around the world, how to watch the launches. Because it can be really confusing, because here in North America, in the United States, we still observe daylight savings time. And we do that for the most part in 4 time zones. But Hawaii doesn't, and Arizona doesn't. And, you got that going on. So the way the numbers shift is different when you live in a time zone that never changes versus the time zone that's going to daylight savings time. Because the daylight savings time people, they add an hour to the clock, and 3 o'clock becomes 4 o'clock. But for everybody else who's doing a subtraction, when we go forward an hour, instead of subtracting the amount of hours that they did, so going from Eastern to Hawaii, for instance, is 5 hours when you're in standard time, and it's 6 hours when you're not. So there you go. It complicates things. And not only that, people around the world don't even understand what the abbreviations mean. So that totally confuses people. And we have people who don't understand the difference between AM and PM, or why the dates are written differently. So there's that. I just like to make it easier for people to understand when to watch the launches. Oh, and I also wanted to talk tonight, while I have your eyes and ears. We did have the SpaceX try to launch this launch on Friday night. The other launch was successful. So the other launch did go. The Falcon 9 launch did go from SLC-40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And this launch got down to the last few seconds. Then they reset the clock. They evaluated for a second. It almost seemed like this launch, the Falcon Heavy, was going to go, like they were going to go beyond the launch window, perhaps. But I think they were just sitting in a state of hold so they could evaluate. And to my knowledge, they have not issued a statement for why Falcon Heavy did not go. So let me see, Falcon Heavy didn't launch Friday, April 28th, 2023. Why? So this is that. There's their thing. Let's see what they say over here on SpaceX or space.com. Do they have an explanation? And you can read along with me. Attempted to launch at the last minute with 59 seconds from lifting off at 8:26 on Friday when they called it abort. The rocket was about to enter its startup phase but did not ignite its 27 first stage engines, 9 of each on its 3 core boosters. It's unclear what caused the abort. SpaceX just says we called the abort at 59 seconds. And that the purpose of the countdown is to catch any issues prior to flight. There are thousands of ways to launch a rocket, and there's only one way it can go right. So it does not appear that they actually issued a statement as to why it didn't go Friday. So it wasn't weather. They're just not telling you. So that was published yesterday. I haven't seen any statements from SpaceX. So I don't believe that we're going to get an answer about the why. Now, it's possible that the why had something to do with the payloads, and it's possible that the owners of the payloads didn't want to publicize that information, in which case SpaceX could not. So it could be that. That's the possibility. And that, folks, is the end of Slightly Off Axis podcast for tonight, April 30th, 2023. You've been watching the special edition to deal with the flight of Falcon Heavy, which we expect tonight from Kennedy Space Center's Launch Complex 39A. Tune in to Freedom Speech and You. See, this is totally unrehearsed, and I can flub up at any time, and you can laugh on your side of the broadcast. Freedom Speech and You tonight, or watch the aforementioned SpaceX live feed without commentary in the chat. They don't have a chat on theirs. They keep theirs devoid of chat so anybody can watch it. So it's good for people of all ages, and it's good for people of all persuasions because you don't run into any politics. And if you've ever watched the NASA Facebook lives, you'll see why. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to mention. SpaceX does not have an official Facebook site. They only have YouTube at SpaceX, and they only have Twitter at SpaceX. So if you see something on Facebook that says, quote unquote, that it's the official SpaceX anything, it's not. They may have an employee that actually comes on and does some kind of things, but SpaceX is strictly on YouTube and Twitter, to my knowledge. So stick to those sources, or go to a source that has a feed. If you do want a feed with discussion and you want to stick to rocket and you want to learn a lot about rockets, I recommend NASA Spaceflight. And I'm going to cut that show short so that we can get into Freedom Speech and You. Thank you for watching Slightly Off Axis podcast. We used that to work through the technical difficulties, and we got through all the rocket pre-show information by doing so. So now you see the other show that I do. I am trying to get back to that, and that's about all I'll mention about that. Welcome to Freedom Speech and You. Welcome, Wes, Nick Rich 56, ADM FLA GURL 38, Jackie, Benny Loco. Thank you for reminding people to do the thumbs up, Benny Loco. Casper Northerner. Who else do we have here? Rosebud, welcome. Diane Russell, welcome. HBL Nation, welcome. Five Eggs, welcome. Who else do we have? Robert Reynolds, welcome. Heidi, welcome. Trucker John, welcome. And I am caught up to live. Hooray. Thank you for putting up with me for the last 34 minutes. Okay. So I do believe I have stability now. There still is an issue going on with this computer that generates my video. I don't know. Maybe I'll swap the camera over to that computer, even though they should be identical, and see if it works more efficiently. But I'll do that on my time, not your time. But I'm appreciative of the fact that you let me restart the computer, and I am thankful to StreamYard for keeping the stream live when I left and came back. So technical difficulties notwithstanding, here we go with the show. Let's get into the topics. So let me find the topic list real quick. First of all, tonight's show is entitled Nikki's Folly, Seniors Won't Be Jolly. And there's a reason for that. Nikki Haley is out there saying that Joe Biden will not live until age 86, thus not completing his second term if reelected. Way to throw away the seniors, Nikki Haley. Obviously, Nikki Haley thinks that all of her voters are going to be afraid of Kamala Harris. And so she's trying to get you to vote for her instead of Kamala Harris. But if you look at Real Clear Politics polling data, which we are going to do, let's do that, shall we? Now, mind you, she might have said these comments since this data was compiled. And let's make this big enough that you can see it. Where is her name on this list? Looky here. Okay, you go down here. You see on the third estate, April 27 polling. The third row down, you see 2024 Republican presidential nomination, a Fox News poll. Trump, I presume these are all 53, meaning percent. Trump 53%. And you go through that list and you see Haley. She's only getting 4% of these people in that poll. Trump is leading by 32 percentage points over DeSantis. So she's not even in the top three. She wouldn't even be able to be standing on the stage if the debate for Republicans was being held at this point. I'm a Democrat. I just said that, I didn't mean to say that. But anyway, if you look down there in the next poll down, she comes in at 5. She isn't even in double digits. If you look on the next poll down, she comes in there at 3. And Trump is leading even more in that poll, So, I mean, how many other times do they mention? I mean, the polls, as we go down further, you're dealing with, 2 days earlier. But again, I mean, you see that she is not even in double digits. So it really doesn't matter too much what she says at this point. She's not winning over anybody because anybody that would vote for her that's Republican is voting for either Trump or DeSantis at this point. Now, granted, we're not actually in the primary election yet. And so, a lot could change. That her attacks on Joe Biden are not gaining her anything. If anything, they might be gaining her points with people that may choose who the vice presidential candidate are, but they're not gaining her anything. I love to. What are we? Within 8 o'clock. Okay. I'm approaching 8 o'clock Eastern time. The rocket's supposed to go at 26 after, so I'll keep my eye on the clock. What do we have in the way of headlines? Quick stuff that I can talk about first before you get fired up. This was them talking about it. I'll probably see what day it was when I get there. So I got an ad playing right now. You don't need to see an ad. So I'll wait till the ad stops. And part of this is about weather. Do I see the date on this? Okay, this is from 2 days ago. So the fact that the video is from 2 days ago means that Trump was either testifying 2 days ago on Friday. Pence was testifying to his knowledge of what Trump did on Jan 6, or he had testified the day before. So let's just see what the video says, because it's not going to be the actual testimony.
2020 election. His former vice president, Mike Pence, testifying before the special counsel's grand jury yesterday. That's according to a source familiar with the matter. Pence's appearance coming after months of negotiations. Here with more, NBC's senior legal correspondent, Laura Jarrett. Laura, good to have you as always.
Good morning, guys.
So, former Vice President Pence at the courthouse reportedly from about 9 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, 7.5 hours.
Yep.
What does that tell you?
He has a story to tell. And for months, the special counsel has been trying to get at these conversations. I mean, this is really significant. This is the former vice president of the United States testifying in a criminal investigation into the former president's actions. And we know.
So I'm going to cut out of that real quick, partly because NBC Universal will probably flag me for a copyright strike just for showing it at all. Maybe I'll get lucky if I cut out of it real quick. They won't get into it. But obviously, we got the information I wanted. Pence testified on Thursday. So he finally did testify. So that happened this week. We had this happen also this week. So I'm just going to see if I can see what day. What day is this? Some of you probably know this case more than I do. But that's 3 days ago. So that would have been earlier in the week, Wednesday or Thursday, thereabouts. So we had E. Jean Carroll testify in the civil case against Donald Trump, the rape accusation. So that happened this week. Perhaps some of you want to talk about that. Did you watch that coverage? Did you see anything actually really literally discussed? That's coverage I have there, which I'm not showing, is from MSNBC again, because I'm trying not to get a copyright strike. I had a different piece of coverage. No, that's the same. So can't really show that. Some quick things here before I get into the full-length topics. But this is from CNN. This is a a short video. It's going to be tricky to play it because I'm probably just going to have to let it loop itself. So maybe I can do this. But DeSantis responded to him falling behind in polls, and he got really sarcastic. And so I just thought you might find this somewhat humorous, his reaction. This is him responding to being questioned about falling behind in the polls. So
a new NBC poll shows that DeSantis is trailing former President Donald Trump in the race for 2024. But the poll also shows that voters do not want to see President Trump or President Biden run again.
Governor, polls show you falling behind Trump. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not a candidate, so we'll see if and when that changes.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is in.
See how comical he is? He thinks it's all a joke because he's not a candidate. And yet he obviously is an intended candidate, whether he's declared or not, because he goes around all over the world. I mean, it's either that or he just wants to sell his book. In fact, Trucker John, who's watching this show tonight, shared a picture of seeing copies of his book in Las Vegas. So he is definitely shopping his book all over the place. You know, he's either going to be a presidential candidate or he's just going to make himself rich by trying. Maybe. Yeah, that's still MSNBC, so I can't use that one. This is also a quick one. Ron Filipowski shared this tweet today. Let's see, I won't really be able to get it, and this is going to be a looping kind of thing. And let's see, can I kill the audio on this too? Because this is going to give me a copyright strike. Okay, the audio is killed. Good. So let me get that up. The reason it's going to give me a copyright strike is because of the type of music that's used in it. But Ron Filipowski shared this one. This one is Trump at somebody's wedding. Oops, the audio came up. Let's kill that audio. The audio is YMCA, and here's Trump yucking it up at somebody's wedding again, presumably at Mar-a-Lago. So yeah, there he is yucking it up. I mean, always got some pretty woman in hand, some pretty woman who finds him, you know, interesting or influential for whatever reason. Look at her just like smiling at him, and she lets him kiss her. Oh my God, you know. So we got that going on. What are we doing on time? 3 minutes after 8. Okay. A little bit of DeSantis again, also from Ron Filipowski. So this is interesting. Even though DeSantis is anti-Disney because of his accusation that Disney is woke, see what DeSantis is doing. Ron says, starts to make you wonder if this whole war on Disney is just a bunch of bullshit. Next, we'll catch him drinking a Bud Light. And Alex Bruzewitz reports DeSantis' super PAC was running TV ads during the NFL draft that aired on ESPN. ESPN is owned by Disney. Why is Team DeSantis spending money with Disney? Why indeed? So, you know, it's not like he's boycotting Disney. He will put his message anywhere he wants. Also from Ron, we have a report from the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and you will like this one. So let me get the sound back up for this one. and get it appropriately presented.
Roy, the podium is yours. I'm going to be fine with your jokes, but I'm not sure about Dark Brandon.
Isn't that cute? I love him. He is just so into whatever he can be to point the fun back at everybody. Why did Disney run his ads? Because he paid the money. Okay, Jackie, take care of your hubby and be back soon. So we're 5 minutes after the hour. Okay, and these are the meat and potatoes. That's that. The video for later. Oh, reason why they did not launch the rocket on Friday night. This is another quickie. So this is from William Harwood of CBS News. If your news source does not show you weather in Florida, this is from William Harwood at CBS News and says Falcon Heavy VSAT 3.1. In case you're wondering, here's what 90% no-go looks like. There's a Falcon Heavy in there somewhere. Had golf ball size hail at my house just outside of Kennedy Space Center. Sounded like rocks hitting. Winds possibly gusting in excess of 40 knots. I can verify the winds were indeed above 40 knots because the winds were up there in the 80s and 90s of miles per hour. A knot is slightly more than a mile per hour. Definitely not a good night to launch, he says. And this is the picture, and I don't know if I can get it to expand, but there's this picture, and there, if you see my mouse pointer, is the light out there. Perhaps the light of the moon, perhaps the light of something. And here in all this grayness is the launch tower, and there, right there, is the Falcon Heavy, but you can barely see it. That's how bad the weather was Friday night. So very bad, not good weather for launch. Okay, Rosebud, have a good one. Come back soon. So we have that. We still have a few minutes. They have not gone live. Oh, we have another pro-Biden thing. This is Biden in regards to Donald Trump. We got to wait for the ad to play. Okay. Can I? No, I can't see it. Okay, I can skip the ad now.
Launched your re-election campaign. You've said questions about your age are legitimate, and your response is always, just watch me. But the country is watching, and recent polling shows that 70% of Americans, including a majority of Democrats, believe you shouldn't run again. What do you say to them? What do you say to those Americans who are watching and aren't convinced? You've said you can beat Trump again. Do you think you're the only one?
I may not be the only one, but I know him well, and I know the danger he presents to our democracy, and we've been down this road before. And with regard to age, and polling data, I noticed the polling data I keep hearing about is that I'm between 42 and 46% favorable rating, et cetera. And but everybody running for re-election in this time has been in the same position. There's nothing new about that. You're making it sound like Biden's really underwater. Number one. Number two, when the same polling data asks whether they think what kind of job I've done, it gets overwhelmingly positive results, from 58% thinking everything from the CHIPS Act and all the things we've done. We've created, like I said, we've created 12 million new jobs. We created 800,000 manufacturing jobs. We have economic growth moving. We're in a situation where the climate, we've invested more money and more help in dealing with the climate crisis than any nation in the world. And so things are moving. And the reason I'm running again is there's a job to finish. The other thing is that, look, think about what I inherited when I got elected. I inherited a nation in overwhelming debt at the time, number one, in the hole for the 4 years that he was president. I inherited a nation that had a serious loss of credibility around the world as America first. And, the first meeting I attended the G7, I said, America's back. And one of the world leaders looked and said, for how long? For how long? There's a great concern about the United States being able to lead the free world. And we're doing that again. And those same polls you look at, you take a look at the polls, they're saying whether I pull together NATO and the European Union as well as Asian partners, I think we have. But there's more to do. And with regard to age, I can't even say, I guess how old I am, I can't even say the number. It doesn't register with me. And but the only thing I can say is that one of the things that people are going to find out, they're going to see a race and they're going to judge whether or not I have it or don't have it. I respect them taking a hard look at it. I take a hard look at it as well. I took a hard look at it before I decided to run. And I feel good. I feel excited about the prospects.
Okay, Trucker John, have a good night, sir. Thank you for stopping by.
I think we're on the verge of really turning the corner in a way we haven't in a long time. I know you're tired of hearing me say we're at an inflection point, but we really are. What happens in the next 2, 3, 4 years is going to determine what the next 3, 4 decades look like. And I have never been more optimistic in my life about the possibilities of the United States.
To be clear, though, you just said I know him well. Did Donald Trump's decision to run affect yours? Would you be running if he wasn't?
Yeah, I think I still would be running if he wasn't. I do know him well. He's not hard to know, as you know. You know him well, too. The question is whether or not, look, there's more to finish the job. We have an opportunity to put ourselves in a position where we are economically and politically secure for a long time. Look, we continue to have, and now we don't like to hear me saying it, there's still a contest between autocracies and democracies. And we're the leading democracy in the world. And it's something I know a fair amount about, something I care about, and something that I have found a willingness of an awful lot of our allies and friends to follow. So I think that, we have to finish the job and nail it down.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to...
Oops. So that was from ABC News, where you can see more about that. The first time that I watched that, I was wondering what all that side chatter was. And then I just figured it out just now. All of that side chatter that you hear is a translator translating, because he was speaking with a president from another country. And so when you hear that, if you can hear that, I can, all of that side chatter going on, that's the translator translating what he's saying for the person who doesn't speak English. So, but at first I was like, why is all this vocal crosstalk on here? So, if you tuned in late, can we show this? Can we make this big enough? If you tune in late, we're waiting for in approximately the next 12 minutes to see a rocket launch, and they should go live in a little bit. And essentially what happened, and I'll put these times up just because because I had put this out on social media. Those of you who read the community notices on YouTube, those of you who read Facebook, but unfortunately, those of you who are watching on Twitch, you don't get anything because I have to do a video for you guys to get something, or else I have to chat with you live, which is time prohibitive. But there was a 57-minute launch window for tonight until they evaluated the weather and found out that they could not go until the end of the launch window. So in all these times here, you just ignore the first part of the time and you pay attention to the other ones. So for the UTC viewer that's tuning in and flying through this video and going, hey, when's this launch happening? There you go. 0026 UTC tomorrow. Are we in tomorrow yet? Yes, we're already in tomorrow for the UTC viewer. For the GMT viewer, it's 12:26 a.m. there. So you're already at 12:16 a.m. if you're in GMT. The rest of the people just read this second number, 9:26 p.m. Atlantic, 8:26 p.m. Eastern, 7:26 Central, 6:26 Mountain, 5:26 Pacific, or 2:26 in Hawaii. Most of Hawaii. There's a portion of Hawaii that does have a different time zone. Obviously, if you're in that different time zone, you should know how to convert from Honolulu to where you are. So those are the times. Let me go see. And I did not want to do that, and I did that anyway. Oh, well. So bear with me while I reload the page that allows me to share video, because I closed the page. It happens. It's all so easy. You ever notice how all those wonderful things that you do that ask you, do you really want to do this? You usually really want to do whatever it is, but all those things that you wish would say, do you really want to do this? Have no pages like that. You can just click it and leave, and you go, oops, I didn't want to do that. So where's my link? All right. That's my link back in. Let me connect back in. There is a rocket tonight. We're expecting it in about 9 minutes. And I was getting to the point where I could load their live stream. Unless you've actually seen that there is no rocket tonight, which you could have, because you could be watching tweets that I can't see yet because I'm not looking at Twitter. So let's go to Twitter first and see what SpaceX is saying. It's possible, but it is supposed to happen at the end of the window. So if it doesn't happen at the end of the window, it's not going to happen at all, because they only get one shot at it tonight. So let's see what they're saying. Supposed to happen. So they got the video live on Twitter. Countdown on Twitter is approaching 11 minutes to go. So let's not do it on Twitter. It will look much better on YouTube, and it'll eat up less computer power. Where are we? Let's get that.
Three times.
Are they talking?
The last burn will take place around the T+4 hour and 20-minute mark into flight. Deployments will wrap up about 25 minutes after the final burn, and that makes our mission duration for today just under 5 hours. At T-minus 10 minutes and 48 seconds, systems are currently a go for an on-time liftoff. The vehicle is nearly fully loaded with propellants, the range is green and ready to support. Now, if for some reason we do not launch today, we do have a backup opportunity tomorrow at the same time. Now at T-minus 10 minutes and 30 seconds and counting, let's take a closer look at the Falcon Heavy vehicle.
Okay, this is the part where they get into the narration of
Anderson,
everything.
a production engineering manager here.
So instead of watching the narration video, we'll go back to our show and I'll keep my eye on them. And we'll come back as the countdown gets closer to launch time. So, a few minutes. Okay, we have those. We have those. We'll stick to things that are short. Hopefully I can open this in a new tab. Okay, so before I bring this up, I'm going to introduce where I got this video from. So this video is Starship Orbital Launch Mount Excavating, or excavation occurring underneath what they refer to as Stage 0, which is the launch tower for Starship's orbital tests. It dug a hole when they lighted up all the engines. And this is Jessica Kirsch's video. Her name is spelled Jessica. Kirsh is the last name. This video was shot on Saturday, April 29th. It's excavation work continuing beneath the OLM, the Orbital Launch Mount, after Starship Orbital Flight Test 1, OFT-1, left a trench beneath the OLM, which expedited excavation work necessary for water-cooled steel plate sandwich, is what Elon calls it, or a plate of steel underneath the rocket to be built in somewhat of a trench that will be water-cooled. Instead of building the concrete trench that NASA has out at Kennedy Space Center, going to build a steel plate underneath the pad, and it will allow for the exhaust gases to go and the sound to go, and won't have concrete underneath, so it won't tear up the concrete. And this is Elon's plan with his people. And Elon expects a new launch in 6 to 8 weeks. So that's his estimate. You know, Elon is always eager to go. So now that I've introduced the video,
creating satellites with greater capacity to carry.
Wrong one. That's the other video, which is about 4 minutes away. So can I add two at the same time? That's the question. No, I cannot. So I have to unshare that one. So I need to switch over here. Okay. And is that the right one? Yes. Okay, so this is Jessica Kirsch's video. This is a video of them doing the excavation. It's not done in real time. It's sped up, so it's time lapse. But essentially, that's what's going on out at Starbase in Texas. And so she's there covering it all. And that's what's going on out there at Starbase. Okay? So you got a Starbase update for tonight. And thank you, Jessica Kirsch, for that. And where are we again? Let's switch back. They're still talking. It's a little over 5 minutes, about 5 minutes and 45 seconds based on the internet version of what's going on. So it hasn't launched yet. They're still talking. We'll come back to them. So let's see. How do you like the show tonight? And trying to keep it a fast pace and just have a lot of items discussed. We do not have enough time to get into that. It must be running a little later, or is this live? Yeah, it's live. So don't really have time to talk about those topics yet. Not really that one yet. Got the video. So let's see what you want to talk about. I will put this back up so I can see it and tell when they stop doing all of their animation and talk. Nick Rich says, I'd volunteer for a one-way mission anywhere in our solar system, anywhere one else. HBL Radio Nation restreaming the show. Thank you very much. We do appreciate the exposure. Okay, they are back live. Hang on one second. Let me get them back on.
Will retract away from the vehicle, and this is to clear the way for ascent. Strongback is used to provide structural support as well as routing for fluids.
NY booster, lock load complete.
As well as routing for fluids and power to the vehicle.
PY booster, lock load complete.
We just heard LOX loading finished up on the PY booster. Next up at around T-minus 2 minutes, LOX loading will complete on the second stage. After LOX loading finishes loading onto the second stage, the entire vehicle will be completely full with 2.8 million pounds of propellant.
Center core, LOX load is complete.
Just hearing the various boosters finish up their LOX loading. Looks like quite a nice day down there in Cape Canaveral. Weather is much more cooperative for this attempt today. Now again, in just about 15 seconds, we will be completing LOX loading on the second stage, which will wrap up the propellant loading phase of our countdown.
If you were wondering about the designations of NY and PY
Second
booster.
stage, LOX load is complete.
And there it is. Falcon Heavy is now fully loaded with 2.8 million pounds of propellant. Coming up next, we should see some white clouds venting from the TE LOX line. This is completely normal and part of our closeout process.
Okay, if you're wondering about the designation.
The vehicle will enter startup at T-minus 1 minute. This is when the onboard flight computers take control of the countdown.
The designation of NY versus PY booster. NY.
And shortly after the vehicle enters the startup phase, our LD or launch director should give the final go for launch. Let's listen in for those callouts.
NY mathematically refers to the left of center when looking at the side of the rocket that is not adjoined to the tower, because it's the negative axis. PY is the positive axis. It's the right side booster. So NY is left, PY is right. And
Falcon Heavy is in startup.
There we go. Falcon Heavy has just entered the startup phase.
And the center booster is the one in the middle that holds on to those two.
Go for launch.
And with confirmation of go for launch from our launch director, Falcon Heavy is ready to go to space at T-minus 37 seconds with the Viasat 3 mission.
15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power. And liftoff of Viasat 3. Go Viasat, go Falcon Heavy. Vehicle is pitching downrange. M1D chamber pressure is nominal.
We are 30 seconds into flight under the power of 5 million pounds of thrust. Falcon Heavy is headed to space. Now we are throttling down our engines on those side boosters, and that's in preparation for max Q.
Power into telemetry nominal.
Max Q is the moment of peak mechanical stress.
Falcon Heavy is supersonic.
Peak mechanical stress on the vehicle. So we do slow down the vehicle to get through this period of high stress. And once we pass through max Q, we will throttle those engines back up on those side boosters.
Max Q.
And great call out, we have passed through max Q. So we're gonna throttle up those engines again on these side boosters. You can follow along the telemetry on your left hand, on the bottom left hand of your screen. You can see the speed and the altitude of the vehicle, and some incredible views of Falcon Heavy in flight. Now, 2 minutes into flight, we will reduce the thrust on the two side boosters again, and that will be to decrease the forces on the vehicle structure. And that's because the vehicle is now lighter as we're burning through the fuel on the vehicle, but the thrust will remain constant. And wow, that looks amazing on the screen, all three boosters burning bright there.
Falcon Heavy is following a nominal trajectory.
And good call out on trajectory. Now again, we're gonna throttle down the side boosters, and then the next event coming up in about a minute or just under a minute will be BECO, that's booster engine cutoff. That's where we will shut down the engines on the side boosters, and then we will separate the side boosters from the center core. And as a reminder, we are not landing our side boosters or center core today due to performance needed on today's mission. And you can see on your right-hand screen, we do have a view of the separation mechanisms from the center core to the side boosters. And BECO, or booster engine cutoff, is coming up here in a few seconds.
MVAC engine chill has started. Booster engine cutoff.
Side booster separation confirmed. Both side boosters, FTS has safed.
Great views there. We had BECO, booster engine cutoff, and we watched as those side boosters, and you could see them there on your screen, those side boosters falling
Vehicle
away.
is following a nominal trajectory.
Falling away from Falcon Heavy's center core. Awesome views. That's gonna wrap it up for the side boosters today. The next event coming up here in about 30 seconds or so is main engine cutoff. That is also called MECO, and that will be on the center core, followed by stage separation and then the startup of our second stage engine.
Hello, Tina.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed. Stage 1 FTS has safed.
MVAC ignition.
So as you see there, the center booster burned longer than the two side boosters.
We watched MECO as the engines on the center core shut down, stage separation, and now you can see on your screen that the MVAC engine has ignited. Now we are coming up on fairing separation.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And also we're able to see and hear the call out that
Stage 2 is following a nominal trajectory.
that the fairing halves have separated. They are now falling back down to Earth, and we will attempt to recover them using our recovery vessel, Doug. Now what you're looking at on your screen is a view on our second stage, looking aft at our MVAC engine. And our MVAC engine on the second stage is currently in the middle of its first burn. This burn has about 1.5 minutes left. After that, we'll have an additional 2 burns of our second stage engine before payload deployment.
It's spelled Doug, D-O-U-G, for the astronaut who flew on board the Demo 2 mission.
On your left-hand screen, you could see a map of the mission trajectory. And on your right-hand screen is a live view of the MVAC engine. As a reminder, our main payload for today's...
Stage 2 continues to follow a nominal trajectory.
Good callouts. Our main payload for today's mission is Viasat-3, and we do have 2 secondary payloads on board as well from Gravity and Astronis. That is the Gravity Space 1 and Astronis's micro-geo satellite. If you're just now joining us, we're currently in the middle of the first of 3 burns for this MVAC engine today. The next event coming up is in just under 1 minute and 15 seconds. We will have SECO 1, or what we call second engine cutoff 1. And that will end the first of those 3 burns. Today's mission marks SpaceX's 28th launch this year, 227th overall mission to date, and our 5th operational Falcon Heavy mission.
There is another ship that's called
Stage 2
Bob.
STS has saved.
Now on your right-hand screen, you can see the MVAC engine.
Stage 2 has entered terminal guidance.
And we're getting good call-outs there. On the bottom right-hand of your screen, you can see the speed of the second stage as well as the altitude. And we are about 20 seconds or so from
Good call,
SECO 1.
Diane Russell.
That's where we will shut
And
down
welcome,
this
Human
MVAC engine
FBN.
and allow the vehicle to coast with the payloads on board.
Looks like we lost the signal, Cape.
Nick, remember that plants need CO2 to live and we need oxygen. So putting CO2 in the atmosphere is
And you
not
can
bad.
see that MVAC engine beginning to shut down. We did hear a call out for expected loss of signal.
Okay, so Rosebud, the prevailing winds must be pushing toward you.
And we got confirmation of good orbit. So with confirmation of second engine cutoff and a good orbit, we'll be heading into a coast phase until our second relight of our MVAC engine around the T plus 30-minute mark. We'll come back to bring you live coverage of that second burn in about 20 minutes. So until then, sit back and enjoy the space tunes.
Okay, so they start playing music for the next few minutes. We can keep that handy and maybe come back if you actually want to see the deployments if you've never seen them before. So we'll try to do that. See if I can get it to minimize. Take it out of. There we go. Pull it back to live. Stop sharing that tab. Take it out of that. And let's see, where are we? So I don't need that because that was that. And I don't need that one because we can't show that really. I just wanted to talk about those because the more stuff I show from Universal, the more likely they're hitting me with a copyright strike. So today on Meet the Press, which is one of the shows I watch, they were going through the headlines, and the headlines were that Trump was projecting his incompetence remarks. That's what I wrote down. He was trying to go through his claim that Joe Biden is mentally incompetent, thereby projecting what the reality is because he's the one who's mentally incompetent. You don't give a person a mental test unless you think they're mentally incompetent. Marco Rubio was worrying about companies running away from Florida because of DeSantis' vendetta against Disney. Biden appropriately laughs off references from Nikki Haley and others in regard to his age. I think we showed that already. Border Patrol was among one of the topics, and that was what the first interview was about. So you would think that that's all the show was going to be about, but the show was actually different. And we will get into the show. But what I wrote down today for today's show was the body of Meet the Press was surprisingly not about these headlines. Instead, they had Vivek Ramaswamy, if I'm saying his name correctly, Republican presidential candidate, as their second guest. And their first guest is a member of the administration talking about the border. The panel did discuss some of these topics, as I said. And the third guest was, oops, that's not good. Pulled the earbud out of my ear. The third guest, last guest, oops, pulled it apart too. Shot it across the room, so I'll have to get up and pick up that. The third guest was the son of Tim Russert, Luke Russert, and he was discussing his book. So I enjoyed what the show was about today. I got to watch the show. So let's see if we can find that. So here's the article about it. So the first guest was Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. The panel was made up of Yamiche Alcindor, Claire McCaskill, Lonnie Chain, and Ryan Nobles. And they did not put in the headline here about the final guest. So Todd comes on, he goes, "This Sunday, an age-old problem, we now have to finish the job and there's more to do," says Biden. After officially launching his 2024 campaign focusing on Trump, Biden discusses concerns about his age. "I can't even say the number. You saw this in the clip earlier. It doesn't register with me." That was the clip that we showed from ABC News. We talked about the fact that Nikki Haley thought that Biden would not make it to 86 years of age, and she doesn't think it's likely. And she, of course, got the show tonight named after her statement. We talked about the fact that Trump keeps his focus on Biden and says he's grossly incompetent, no idea what he's doing, which the latter is true. The form, I mean, you know, Trump is the guy that's incompetent. Give me 1 second. It's bugging me that I threw that on the floor over here. So, because I will want to listen later. So I'm coming back. The latter is true that, or whatever I want to say, it's projection on Trump's part. He's the one that is incompetent, but he just doesn't know it or he doesn't want to admit it. And, you know, he could be projecting constantly to try to take the heat off of himself because surely he knows he didn't do a good job with COVID. At least he should. Todd goes on to say, are these two in a codependent relationship? It seems they need each other in order to succeed in 2024. And then introduces the fact that they're going to talk to candidate Ramaswamy, who's a millennial entrepreneur who's running for a Republican nomination, and talks Disney and DeSantis. Disney sues Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, accusing him of retaliating against the company. DeSantis says in a clip, and I could get to the clip, but he really only says this one statement in the middle of the clip. So I chose not to use the statement. He says, I don't think the suit has merit. I think it's political. If you do actually want to see that, though, I know where to find it. Todd continues, but Republicans are now distancing themselves as the battle with entertainment giant escalates. And Marco Rubio has put out a statement or said on one of the interview shows, I do worry that if this happens too many times, businesses are thinking about coming to Florida are saying, maybe we don't want to go there. It's interesting that he says that because he should also be considering the fact that businesses in Florida may want to leave as well, particularly the entertainment industry. Then Todd gets into this business about the border. And I noted that online when I was reading through Twitter looking for other topics, people were excited that Todd mentioned the border because, you know, they're like, hey, now Chuck Todd is being fair. You know, he's mentioning the border. So I'm keeping my eye on the clock to see when SpaceX comes back. But they haven't come back yet. We still got a few more minutes for that. So Todd interviews Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, who says our border is not open and will not be open after May 11. Oh, that's a clip. Excuse me. Representative Michael McCall said this is irresponsible. So he plays both sides in clips. Todd talks about Biden's strategy making a difference. Will it make a difference? And then he interviews Mayorkas and discusses the fact that he's going to talk to Luke Russert about his book called Look For Me There. And he introduces the panel, which I said their names earlier. The Washington correspondent for NBC News, Yamich Alencourt, former Democratic Senator from Missouri, Claire McCaskill, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, and Lonnie Chen, a fellow at Hoover Institution. And we see them, and he welcomes us to meet the press. And then the announcer does his thing. And he talks about 10 years ago, the Gang of Eight running out the immigration plan that they thought would be passing Congress. And Rubio giving his statement that we all wish we didn't have this problem, but we do, and you have to fix this because leaving things the way they are, that's real amnesty. Lindsey Graham saying, I think 2013 is the year of immigration reform. I guess that's an old clip. If that's actually written correctly, he might have said 2013, and the article here may just say that incorrectly. Okay, so Todd says, but it was not. So 10 years ago, it didn't work. So yeah, okay, so that was correct. 2 years later, Donald Trump would launch his campaign. He goes into that and building his entire political identity on the border and talking about the wall. And instituting the idea that he should separate migrant children from their parents and remain in Mexico, sending migrants back to Mexico while seeking U.S. asylum. Biden wanted a sweeping immigration plan on his first day of office, but he didn't get it through Congress. And he notes that Biden didn't mention this in his announcement for president, and that it's one of his toughest challenges. And then he gives the statistics, which the Republicans love. More migrants crossed the southern border in any year since 1960. And then broke the record again in 2022. And the ending of Title 42, the emergency public health bill that kept people from coming in if they had COVID. Let me check the video. No, still about 5 minutes left. Keep my eye on that clock. And talking about Mexico not dealing with the cartels and the fentanyl coming into the country, which is sourced from China, but comes through Mexico to get to the United States. And it being a leading cause of death for Americans age 18 and 49, between those numbers, according to statistics compiled by Washington Post. The Biden administration is attempting to stem unauthorized migration by opening new processing centers, creating a new family reunification program, and increasing assistance to counter smuggling. The Homeland Security Secretary, who's being interviewed today, acknowledged that it would be a border search, but he also said it does not mean that more migrants should come. And he said, the smugglers' propaganda is false. Let me be clear, our border's not open and will not be open after May 11. And then Todd introduces him. They say they're pleasantries. Todd mentions an execution-style shooting in Texas that was horrific. And the suspect is Francisco Oropeza, if I'm saying his name correctly. So I guess, we're assuming this individual, or they know the individual, came from Mexico. The secretary says it's a horrific crime. I can assure you, American people, that law enforcement will deliver accountability to cases active under investigation, so I can't comment further. Todd says there's question about his citizenship, that he had a consulate card from Mexico, meaning he was here illegally, but perhaps had overstayed. The secretary repeats he can't talk about the case because it's active, and he says that it is a tragedy, absolutely horrific, and that the heart go out to the victim's family, and those children will deliver accountability. Todd asks, do we know who's involved in this? FBI, local authorities, DHS, is your team involved? The secretary says we're monitoring the situation very carefully, and the FBI is in the lead of the investigation. Todd says, let's talk about what's coming after life of the 42 bill. There's already reports of Brownsville, Texas right now. Shelters are overwhelmed. Watching more time. Okay. Cities of Chicago and New York are already overwhelmed, and May 12 going to look like if they're already overwhelmed with the expiration of Title 42. Mayorkas says that there's this really tough challenge, and it's been a tough challenge for many years. We're seeing a level of migration, not just at our southern border, but throughout the hemisphere, that it's unprecedented. I think it's the greatest migration since World War II. The president on one day delivered a solution. He delivered immigration reform that we hope Congress would act on swiftly. They haven't. Within the constraints of broken immigration system, we're doing much. Our approach is to build lawful pathways, cut out ruthless smugglers, deliver lawful pathways so people can access humanitarian relief without having to take the dangerous journey from their home countries. And at the same time that they arrive in the southern border in ports of entries, we would deliver consequences. Let's see. Getting closer to the time of the video. But I think they're still on. Yeah, they're still on music. Okay. So Todd continues, I want to go through some specific scenarios. If an unaccompanied minor under 18 that comes to our southern border on May 12th, what happens? We will follow the law, and the law provides we take custody of that child. We have 72 hours within which to transfer that child, an unaccompanied child, to the Department of Health and Human Services. Then it is for the Department of Health and Human Services to identify a relative, a sponsor in the United States, whom they can transfer the child to. Todd asks, do you accept this as a loophole? We have to take a look at a humanitarian issue here. These are parents that are suffering such desperation, whether it's by reason of authoritarian regime, tremendous violence, acute poverty, persecution. They're so desperate they send their children to the southern border alone. We have the law provides for humanitarian relief for these children. Okay, we're getting ready to come back here. Because now they're showing a camera image just for a moment. Still got more time to go on that though. So Todd asks when a family comes to the border, if they're not any of this pre-filing, if they're not filed for an asylum claim beforehand, they come to the border on May 12th. What happens to a family with children under the age of 18? Mayorkas says we will exercise enforcement authorities in traditional immigration contexts. Title 42 is a public health authority, not an immigration authority, that was delivered in response to COVID-19. When that ends on May 11th, we will use our immigration authorities under Title 8 of the United States Code. That family will be placed in immigration enforcement proceedings, removal proceedings. They will make a claim. If they make a claim for relief, we will adjudicate that claim to release swiftly. By the way, I need to correct an error I made earlier. Title 42 basically said if they had COVID, they were brought into the country, so they were treated. Earlier, I mistakenly said they were kept out. That was not true. They were brought into the country so they could receive treatment. Getting closer. Okay, now they're back.
3 America's mission. If you're just joining us, we did have an on-time liftoff at 8:26 p.m. Eastern Time from Kennedy Space Center's Launch Complex 39A. Due to the performance requirements on this mission, we did not recover the side boosters or the center core, but our second stage is well on its way. Coming up next is the second of 3 total burns that the second stage needs to execute before payload deployment. Now, for this next burn, we might lose ground station coverage, partly through the burn. So while we may not be able to confirm SECO-2 or good orbit immediately after, our team on console will be able to confirm this when we acquire signal from the next ground station. Now, this burn should last just about 2 minutes and starting any second now. As you can see on your screen, we did just start up the second engine for the second burn. The purpose of this burn is to take us from a parking orbit in low Earth orbit and extend our apogee, or peak of the orbit, to an altitude of about 30,000 kilometers.
He said second engine. He really meant to say second stage engine or stage 2 engine. There's only one engine on stage 2.
The next burn after this, the third burn, will take the lower side of that orbit and also extend it out to about 30,000 kilometers. And that will put us in a geostationary orbit. Now, what's special about a geostationary orbit is it takes roughly 24 hours for a satellite in this orbit to complete one full orbit around the Earth.
Expected loss of signal, goodbye.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, it does look like we have lost ground station coverage. So once we regain signal at the next ground station, we should hear a call out for SECO 2, and that stage 2 is in a good orbit. Now, as far as live coverage for our third and final burn, that will occur in a couple of hours from now at the T+ 4 hour and 22 minute mark. I hope you all stick with us, and we will see you then.
Okay, so they're coming looking for that. That's going to be a few moments. We'll try to time that in as well. So back to the other content. So they will adjudicate and remove people swiftly. And then Todd asked him to define that. It could be days or weeks. It's not going to be months and months. Todd says, we've seen that in New York. Migrants are getting court dates in 2033. How does that happen? Mayoker says, what we have done now is we're going to be able to exercise our immigration enforcement authorities. We've been precluded from doing so by a court. We sought to end Title 42 long ago. Todd says, okay. Title 42 does not deliver an immigration consequence. Title 8 of the United States Code does. If an individual is removed under Title 8, they will encounter at least a 5-year ban on readmission to the United States. Todd asks, there's 2 million cases in the backlog right now. What happens to new asylum claims on May 12th? Do they get put in a line behind these 2 million cases? Or do they get the quick adjudication? I get it in theory. How's it going to work in practice when we're sitting on 2 million case backlog? Mayorkas says we're going to focus on recent border crossers, but the fundamental point is we have more than 2 million cases in the immigration backlog that's been building year over year. What a powerful example of a completely broken immigration system. We've got to fix it. We need legislative reform. Yes, Congress should pass legislation that gives them the people to do this instead of talking about removing people from federal agencies. They should be adding people in federal agencies to handle this issue. You can't say that you're the GOP and you're fixing this issue if you're cutting the budget and not giving them people to fix this issue. I know there's a comprehensive aspect that we need, says Todd. But just for border enforcement and the migration, you need more money for what? Do you want more processing centers besides the 2 you're opening? Or could you open up one in Venezuela? Or do you trust the government to allow that? Mayorkas says we need resources for it all. Resources make us able to move more quickly within the broken system. But I want to be clear, he says, we're working with significant constraints. We need people. That's what I said. They need more people. They need technology. They need facilities. They need transportation resources. All the elements of addressing the needs of a large population of people arriving irregularly at the southern border. What's the definition of a secure border? Asked Todd. Mayorkas says in the context in which we are working, it's maximizing the resources that we have available to deliver most effective results. He mentions the fact that the apprehension rates are consistent with the previous administration, and that's because of the extraordinary, heroic work of the Border Patrol. The challenge is enormous, he says. Todd says the union doesn't like you. They make it pretty clear on social media. And the union says the chickens are going to come to roost because of what he's done. They call you, Mayorkas, a national disgrace. They call for your removal. How can you lead a group of people whose union wants you out of office? Mayorkas says, I'm incredibly proud to work for the United States Border Patrol. I've supported them vigorously since my first day in office. I continue to do so, a tremendous source of pride. So he's proud to work with them. Todd asks, what's the disconnect? Do you think it's media perception? Is it political? Is it red versus blue? Or just simply you're in a Democratic administration? Mayorkas says he's focused on a mission. He looks at the needs. He tries to fulfill the needs. He goes to Congress to seek support. This is the first administration since 2011 that's put more agents on Border Patrol. And they want 350 more for the next year. And that hasn't happened in over 12 years. Then they talk about the fentanyl issue. He asked what the toughest aspect of it is. It's a matter of supply and demand, says Mayorkas. In his years as a federal prosecutor, he said that he hasn't seen anything this severe. Nothing is like fentanyl. The toxicity of fentanyl is worse than all of the other drug cases you work with. Todd talks about in the 1980s, they worked with the Colombian government. And broke up the cartels. Mayorkas says we are taking it to cartels and unprecedented strength and focus. And that, there's a misperception that Mexico is not a good partner in a fight against them. Is the governor an ally or not? Asked Todd. They are an ally, and we have a very close partnership with them. And Todd says, then how come they don't help with fentanyl? They just seem to ignore it. That's a misconception. I will tell you, you have transnational criminal investigative units. Our Homeland Security investigation personnel are in Mexico. I guess AMLO is the Mexican president. I'm not really knowledgeable on that sort of stuff. But AMLO denies it, though, says Chuck Todd. AMLO himself denies it in public that somehow they're having anything to do with fentanyl trafficking. And Mayorkas says, I can't speak to his public statements. I can speak to what happens on the ground operation when we work very closely with Mexican partners. Fentanyl, though, the precursor chemicals and equipment used to manufacture it, much of it originates in China, and we've got to stop that flow. What is a good way to do that? Asked Todd. Mayorkas says the problem is that the relationship with China is not very positive, but they're working with the Mexican authorities. We're working with our partners internationally to put pressure on China to interdict the flow, to identify the transport companies, to cut off finances, to hold individuals and companies accountable. And then Todd asks about President Biden, because he says that, Mayorkas is in on these cabinet meetings. Do you think Biden's up to a second term? When you see him face to face, is he up to it? And Mayorkas responds, he's incredibly sharp, incredibly probing, incredibly command of details, asking tough questions. I'm incredibly proud to serve in his administration. I'm incredibly proud of the work we've done across the board. You have full confidence he can do a second term? 100%, says Mayorkas. And then they talk about talking to each other again. And then Todd introduces the second guest, Vivek Ramaswamy, the millennial businessman. Oh, did we come back while I was busy? Yeah, we missed it. I can roll it back. Did they show anything? They didn't, I don't think did they show any video on that? No, there's just an audio call that they had that second event. So that's not as thrilling if it's audio and not visual. I don't know what's coming up. I'll have to look and see, but might be, I would think there would be satellite deployment. So I'll try to do. Hey, Jim, welcome. I did see your name earlier. I'm not sure when you joined. So welcome, Jim the Geek. So Todd goes and gives his introduction and says, the line about, as we debate about if somebody's too old to be president, there's this youngest candidate in the 2024 field, and he's introducing himself to voters. He's only 37 years old. He's a multimillionaire who graduated from Harvard College and Yale Law, made his fortune as a hedge funder in biotech. He ran an asset management company which calls itself anti-woke. A first-time candidate for political office, he says he has plans to start an anti-woke cultural movement. Plays a clip of Vivek Ramaswamy saying we're in the middle of a national identity crisis that leaves a vacuum in its wake. When you have a vacuum that runs deep, that is when poison fills the void. Pick your favorite one: wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, globalism, COVIDism. And so Ramaswamy joins him on stage. They do their introductory. Todd asked him about this anti-wokeism. You wrote books about it. This is your political identity. You've introduced yourself to folks. I get it in the primary. Why you're convinced this message could actually work if you got the nomination in a general election. He says he thinks he's speaking as a member of his generation, but I think it's true of all Americans. Ha 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 ha. If it were true of all Americans, dude, you'd be leading in the polls, which you're not. We looked at the polls earlier. We're all hungry for a cause right now in America. We're hungry for purpose and meaning. Well, millennials are. At a point when the things that used to fill our hunger for purpose, faith, patriotism, family, hard work, these things have disappeared. So I see an opportunity to revive our missing national identity. I think that's something that Americans hunger for across the political spectrum, answering what it means to be an American today. You ask people my age that question, you get a blank stare in response. I think that is the vacuum at the heart of our national soul. I'm running for president to revive the ideals that actually set the nation into motion, and I think it's going to unite the country. Todd notes, it's interesting, your rhetoric can sound uniting in your answer just now, but then you say the following things, quote, the trans movement has become a cult. We need to abandon climate religion in America. I definitely find the idea of systemic racism revolting. Those are his quotes. I say this How do you square those statements with unification? These are divisive times. This is a polarizing time. We're pretty evenly divided on these cultural issues. How do you unite the country when you're essentially denigrating the views of half the country? Vivek Ramaswamy says, I don't think I'm denigrating the views of half the country. I mean, let's take the touchiest of these subjects right now on the trans issue. I think that when a kid says, I'm born into the wrong body, that my gender doesn't match my biological sex, more often than not, that's a case of mental health disorder. So he has the audacity to go back to age-old ideas that transgenderism is a mental health disorder. And this is what is prevalent on the MAGA side of the aisle. But then he has the audacity to say that doesn't mean you disrespect the person. You absolutely do disrespect the person by not seeing it from their viewpoint. He continues, it means they're crying out for help. I met with 2 young women who regret the decisions they made going through double mastectomies, one a hysterectomy chemical intervention. Now I'm trying to teach kids across the country that when you're struggling inside, going through adolescence, yes, that involves some struggle. We live in cultural movement today where adults are affirming that confusion rather than actually treating them compassionately. That's cruelty. I do believe I have a clip of him actually saying that.
Perfectly legitimate to say that we won't allow genital mutilation or chemical castration through puberty blockers.
You're calling it that,
transition.
But how do you know it's that? Again, how do you know, are you confident that you know that gender is as binary as you're describing it? Are you confident that it isn't a spectrum?
I am.
You know this as a scientist?
Well, there's 2 X chromosomes if you're a woman, an X and a Y. That means
There's
you're a man.
lot
So
of
there's a
scientific
biological basis
research
for
out
this.
there. There's a lot of scientific research out there that says gender is a spectrum.
Chuck, I respectfully disagree. It's perfectly legitimate.
Okay, that's further into the story. I think there's also another clip. There's another clip that's from that same part of the show. Which might be longer. Yeah, this one is longer. I don't know if it's that exact part because he discusses this subject for a few minutes. So
how do you unite the country when you're essentially denigrating the views of half of the country?
I don't think I'm denigrating the views of half the country. I mean, let's take the touchiest of those subjects right now on the trans issue. I think that when a kid says that I'm born into the wrong body, that my gender doesn't match my biological sex, more often than not, that is a case of a mental health disorder. That doesn't mean you disrespect that person. It means they're crying out for help. I met with 2 young women who regret the decisions they made, going through double mastectomies, one a hysterectomy, chemical intervention, now trying to teach kids across the country that when you're struggling inside, going through adolescence, yes, that involves some struggle. We live in a cultural moment today where adults are affirming that confusion rather than actually treating them compassionately. That's cruelty.
You ever talk to parents that have a kid who's going through this?
I have, actually. Yeah, and I think
it's a parent. My point
is, it's a difficult place to be. I acknowledge that. But what we need to do on both sides here is act with compassion, not really what makes us feel good about ourselves. And I think that's my main issue across our response to transgenderism and to climate. It's solving the actual underlying issues rather than what allows you to signal your virtue.
What makes it compassionate, though, to pass a law that denies a parent making their own healthcare decision for their kid? That's the part of this. That doesn't sound very conservative and small government to me.
Well, look, there isn't a state in this union that allows you to smoke an addictive cigarette before the age of 18, that allows you to get a tattoo before the age of 18. That's a body-altering change that a kid may later regret in life. So I think it is perfectly reasonable to say that if you're after 18 years old, you're free to decide whatever you want to do. That's what it means to live in a free country. But below the age of 18, I think it's perfectly legitimate to say that we won't allow genital mutilation or chemical castration through puberty blockers.
You're calling it that,
transition.
but how do you know it's that? Again, how do you know? Are you confident that you know that gender is as binary as you're describing it? Are you confident that it isn't a spectrum?
I am.
You know this as a scientist?
Well, there's two X chromosomes if you're a woman, an X and a Y. That means you're a man.
There's a lot of scientific research out there. There's a lot of scientific research out there that says gender is a spectrum.
Chuck, I respectfully disagree.
So I think that was repeating there, but you get the gist of all of what he said. So, you know, there is what was being said. So go back to the written discussion here. I think I have to, I got to go back and use the presentation option. So I'll try to pick up the discussion where the video leaves off. You read this part. My point is, difficult to be acknowledged that both sides act with compassion. Makes it a compassionate business about cigarettes and tattoos. Da 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 da. Then he goes into this history thing, and I don't know if I'd have let the video keep playing because he was repeating himself, but he claims historical reasons. Gender dysphoria for most of our history has been characterized as a mental health disorder. So he's at age 37, he's willing to roll back the clock and go back to the dark ages, so to speak, of thinking that you know, if you're not happy being a man and not happy being a woman, it's a mental health disorder. It's not because you have a genetic disposition to be one way or the other, which is totally bogus, totally BS. He tries to whitewash it basically and say that, you know, the reason why kids are thinking that they're not boys or girls when they are, in his opinion, biologically boys or girls, is because of these other people, you know, pointing the finger of blame once again at people who cross-dress for a living, that sort of thing, obviously, and it's just bogus. The child knows what the child wants. The child, you know, the parents seek help for the child. They take the child to professionals. Professionals tell them if the child is going through a phase or not, or if it's real that the child really believes that they should be the other sex. Todd goes on to say, a parent dealing with a child, the last thing they want to do is consider something like this, but if they think they can help their child pursue happiness and not have the child kill themselves, why take away that option? Why shouldn't it be up to the parent? And Ramaswamy tries to say that the reason the parents are making these options is because the culture is teaching them to do this, because if they don't do this, quote unquote, they're bigoted or they're bad people. And he considers gender dysphoria a condition of suffering. And he thinks that allowing them to change their sex is perpetuating the suffering instead of taking it away, when the opposite is true. So what else do we have here? Let me ask you about the Disney. Okay, do I have a clip for the Disney? I don't remember if I have a Disney clip related to him. Let me see. No, I have that one. I have that one. I might have on here. Might have a Disney clip. I don't know. Boy, do they tweet a lot at Meet the Press. And Nick Rich, I saw what you said about things, you know, the bias of Meet the Press and the way it tends to be. But the important thing with all of this is to note that you want to see what the Republicans are saying so you can respond to it. So this has something to do with Disney. I don't know if it deals with this interviewee or not, or whether this is in the opening.
I think the idea of building a prison next to a place that you bring your family is the best idea.
I do worry that if this happens too many times, businesses that are thinking about coming to Florida are saying, maybe we don't want to go there.
If Disney would like to move their hundreds of thousands of jobs to South Carolina and bring the billions of dollars with them, I'll let them know. I'll be happy to meet them.
I don't agree how Disney has handled things, but you don't use the heavy hand of government to punish a business.
Ryan, the number 2 candidate is getting the pylon right now, not the front runner.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, so that was in the panel discussion. We can come back to that later if we want or need to. So back to the does he say anything about Disney? Okay, so he's going to talk about it. Todd says, on the one hand, I assume you agree with pushing back at Disney the way the governor DeSantis has rhetorically, but is there a point where you think it's too much to use government to punish business? Ren Swami says, DeSantis got lost when he when he got involved in it. He's gone on the wrong path, as he claimed, and this part really actually sounded good to me. Disney should never have had crony capitalists lobbying related privileges in the first place. But the party doesn't mention one of those crony capitalist privileges was, and I think it's the most relevant one, was codified into law by none other than Ron DeSantis in 2021. So Florida passed this political anti-discrimination statute, which I applauded at the time. It said if you operate internet companies, this includes streaming services like Disney does, you can't engage in viewpoint discrimination. Now here's the funny, dirty little secret of that. They wrote into a last-minute exception into law for anyone who also operates a theme park more than 25 acres in the state of Florida. That's crony capitalism. So the irony is Ron DeSantis, who's now rallying against crony capitalism and rolling that back, was the one who actually passed into law for the case of Disney. So I think that undermines the credibility of his crusade. I prefer to get to root causes rather than doing political stunts. Todd asked him about cancel culture. Do you think it's going too far? Rob Swami says, I'm an opponent of victimhood culture, cancel culture, you name it. I've written a book about this. I do think the way culture war ends is not with a bang, but with a whimper, where both sides get infected by these same norms. Do you think the right's been infected by this? One of the things I say to conservative audiences across the country, we have to be the party of free speech and open debate. We can't be the party that said, I won't talk to you. I'm here talking to you on NBC. There's other candidates in this race who won't talk to NBC News. Ron DeSantis is one of them. I go to college campuses where other candidates refuse to go. So I think we got to practice what we preach. I'm in this race as a millennial, as a young person who's lived the American dream to actually walk the walk when it comes to free speech and open debate. And yes, I would like to see other Republicans rise to that occasion and do better, starting with the debate stage in our own party this fall. It's interesting that he says that, you know, he's open to free speech and open debate, but he closes the free speech and open debate when he disagrees with something. So often this is the case with Republicans who run for office. If Trump doesn't do debates, will you not support him if he's the nominee? And he says he's not going to let him get away with that. What does that mean? What do you mean you're not going to let him get away with it? He can do what he wants to do. I don't think the other candidates, including Trump, are going to relish being on that debate stage with me. I think that the way that he's shown in 2015, where people gave him credit for what being an outsider and a disruptor. Now I'm the outsider in this race. I think that if you want to be part of the existing establishment that doesn't want to debate, I think people are hungry for new blood. So he paints himself as the outsider now. Todd asks, what should the party use as leverage to force him to show up for the debate stage? Ramswamy says, I think it's the voters. I think it's my job and a job of candidates to tell voters if you want someone sitting across the table from you want someone with the spine to take on administrative state. It's the top of my domestic agenda. You better darn well not be scared to show up on a debate stage and with the new challenger. Trump did a great job of that in 2015. I'm the outsider in this race. Todd asked him about the abortion ban. You would support a 6-week abortion ban. Now, I do have a clip about the abortion ban. So, the abortion ban. It's a short 42-second clip, so I'm not sure which part it mentions.
If you were a governor of a state and all this, what would you do on a federal level? Would you create a floor?
So I believe in being principled on this, Chuck. I'm unapologetically pro-life. And like many in the pro-life movement, I believe that abortion is a form of murder. Murder, though, is regulated by the states, not by the federal government. I believe in the Constitution. I think Roe was wrongly decided. I've said so for a long time. This is a matter for the states, not the federal government, and I stand on principle there.
When does a fetus have constitutional rights?
So look, 6 weeks is at the end of life when you lose brain waves. That's our moment of death.
Where in the Constitution does it say someone has constitutional rights as a fetus?
It's not codified in the Constitution. That's why this is a matter for the states.
If you were a governor.
So there's a clip of what he says. We'll get to the rest of it. It's probably appears to be the opening statement, unless of course he repeated himself. I did watch it, but you know, memorizing the whole interview that runs like 15 minutes is not an easy thing to do. So far it's what he said. So everything. I think he ended somewhere in this state saying not codified in Constitution, matter for the states, believes that. He's unapologetically pro-life. One of the areas we can do better in the pro-life movement is to walk the walk, provide an easier option for women to get to yes. I support a conversation about adoption, childcare, greater responsibility for men. I think that's how we turn this issue into being less Division I than it's been. So, yeah, I think it cut off in the first sentence of that paragraph. Todd says that's a big applause line, but it's a head scratcher for me to fund the FBI. I don't remember if I had, do I have defunding? Yes, I do have defund the FBI. Okay. Not sure if it's a long one or a short one. One minute and 35 seconds, so it's a substantial amount. But obviously, probably not his whole entire statement.
One of your big applause lines that is a bit of a head scratcher for me is defund the FBI.
Yeah.
So if you
I didn't say defund the FBI. I said shut down the FBI and replace it with something new. Yeah.
So you want to shut down the FBI? What are you replacing it with?
I think it's a new apparatus built from scratch that actually respects the law instead of making it up. And the funny thing, Chuck, is if you look at over the last...
Do you think the FBI constantly is making up the law? That is a huge charge. They've just stopped major fentanyl. Been able to get rid of. I mean, there's a lot of work the FBI does. I think other than respond to complaints from elected officials who don't like investigations.
Well, actually, if you look over the course of the last 60 years, J. Edgar Hoover, what he did to Martin Luther King, that was an affront. It's still the J. Edgar Hoover FBI that people walk into down the street here in Washington, D.C. And I personally believe, as somebody who's running to actually run the executive branch of the government, when you have a bureaucracy whose culture becomes so ossified, every once in a while, you need to turn it over. And I think that, yes, we need federal law enforcement, but that institution has, in a bipartisan way, become so, I think, ossified in its own norms, in its own corruption, that we need to rebuild it from scratch and have something.
So you're going to replace the FBI with a new FBI?
Well, with a new institution built from scratch to carry out federal law enforcement, because the existing FBI, the people who work there, have worked there for so long that actually they're going to be getting in their own way. I think that that's actually important. And by the way, I also support
it does sound like you're just replacing the FBI with the FBI.
Well, the problem is there's people who have worked there for decades. And so what I say is if I'm the U.S. president and I can't work for the federal government for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, then none of those bureaucrats reporting into me should either. That's the point I'm making.
So he's a 37-year-old who basically wants to kick out everybody that's older than him, that's been in there for a long time. And let's put all young people in there because he can do it his way. Oh, my God. Dude, you have no idea what kind of havoc you would create. Yes, in every governmental organization where people have been there a long time, there's some degree of bureaucracy. But one of the reasons why there is a degree of bureaucracy is so that when you get a major uninformed person actually win the election, not by winning the popular vote, but by winning the Electoral College. And that dude goes out and golfs instead of worrying about the nation as a whole. That bureaucracy can keep America safe and keep us from having another 9/11. You go around and you get rid of that bureaucracy that you hate so much, shit is going to hit the fan. And the shit is going to hit the fan. And if you, 37-year-old dude, actually end up as president, you're going to be doing this, going, what the fuck did I do? That's what you're going to be doing. America don't vote for a 37-year-old that wants to kick everybody out. Yes, if he has people at the top of the administration who actually present problems, weed them out, retire them off, get them out of the system. But don't throw everybody out of the system, because the system protects you even when you don't know it. The system even protects you from yourself when you're an asshole and you don't realize it. Frustrating. I'm not saying a young person can't ever be president. I'm just saying that that young person has to value the generations that came before them and be able to work with them. And they have to understand the value of this system. So let's see how much of this he actually went through. Defund the SBI, shut down the new, replacing what? A new apparatus built from scratch. Thinks the FBI is making law. Todd mentions the fact that they stopped major fentanyl. And Ramon Wani says all this stuff about it being the same thing, uses the word ossified, which I don't even know what ossified means. I have to look up the word ossified. I presume I know what it means. And it's interesting that he would want to replace the FBI with another organization, because isn't that really what all of the other similar organizations are for? Like if the FBI didn't accomplish this, President, insert name here, created this other body of the, other body of the government that acts and does something, Homeland Security, and so on. He wants to turn these people over every 8 years. Do you realize what that would do to the system? You would have cases that never get resolved, because there are cases that have gone on for more than 8 years. So imagine if you're the parent of a deceased individual and you're hoping that the FBI is going to solve the case of how your child died. And the one person that's working on your case, he gets rid of. Just unthinkable. Unthinkable. And then, of course, his interview was over. They go through the Meet the Press Minute, the Biden re-election. I think we did show that video early. He talks about the ages of Biden being 82 on Inauguration Day if he wins, but Trump would be 78. And the average age is usually 55. And Ford was 62 at the time. And a video from Gerald Ford regarding his state of mind in his 60s. And then he talks to the panel. I'm gonna go through the panel quickly because I'm getting near the end of my usual time to end a show, so I'd like to get through that. But he goes to the panel. We might just thing. So the panel talks about different things. Todd says he thinks, of course, that Biden is better to run against Trump because, the age difference there is minimal. Ryan Nobles gives the line that gets me under the craw. Clearly, most Americans don't want to see either of these two guys at the top of the ticket right now. Well, the ones you get answers from when you do a poll, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that are happy with Biden because they know statistically that Biden has the best chance of winning, regardless of these polls this far out from the election. They know that when it comes down to Biden achieved these goals, he gave us the infrastructure bill and so on and so on. it's easy to answer a poll and say you don't like him right now and you wish somebody else was in office. But when you see how the other people poll, and when you see people like Ramswani saying things that he's going to get rid of the infrastructure that protects this country, when you think about that, when you get in the voting booth, or when you write your ballot at home, if we can still write our ballots at home, I sure hope we can, then you think about different, you know. Nick Rich, when they talk about replacing the FBI, what they're really saying is they want to get rid of the upper administration of the FBI. They think that somehow they can create another entity, and they don't come out and say it. Yeah, human being perhaps a patriotism police. Perhaps what they really want to do is create an agency that doesn't report to the president, but reports to the Congress. Although, why would a person who becomes president give up some of their power? That would be really strange to do. Nobles who diss Biden for his age, though, says that there's just no way that you can put somebody else in because he's more than likely going to win. Claire McCaskill notes that inflation is down to 40%, it's created more jobs than any president or country. Got the infrastructure bill. He has accomplishments. He enjoys the job. I think he would run no matter what. This is never a referendum. Presidential elections, by the time they run around, are always like, why? Well, do you likely like the slightly better than the two you don't like? So it's a binary choice. And even if it's not Trump, extremism is on the ballot, whether they like it or not. True, because he pushed the party so far into extremism, nobody else can win. It's a choice, not a referendum. It's a choice, not a referendum. Every reelect campaign I've covered always to say that. Presidential offices tend to be a choice. It's representatives that tend to be what the people of the area that the representative represents make the choice. And senators tend to be who brings home the bacon, who brings home the pork to the state. You know, because with senators you have assignments. I mean, with representatives too. But with presidents, it tends to be, you know, who can we put in there that if not all of our party votes for this person, enough people from the other side who hate the opponent will vote for our person, and all those people that can't stand either the Democrats or the Republicans will vote for this person. That's what they think about. Do I ever indulge in expletives to express myself? Sometimes. Okay. I think we have something about Nikki Haley, so we're going to go to that here shortly. I don't know that there's too much more to this. We play these videos. Is this about? don't know if that's about Trump or what, but they do interact. I think you can watch the show if you want. You can watch it on NBC's social media for the rest of this. The only other thing I wanted to talk about is Luke Russert was on the show today, and he talked about, and I will briefly summarize this. He talked about his dad and dying, and he talked expressing the whirlwind of emotions that he felt when his dad died, because they had a week. I mean, they had been away with dad. They had a day after dad died to just be mother and son. And then he came back. Then he did the eulogy for his father. He realized how famous his father was, that his father was known by people of both sides of the aisle, that even Joe Biden was there, who's now president, and he had just graduated college, or he was just about to graduate college. And the next thing he knew, he was replacing his father at the desk at Meet the Press. And it was all overwhelming. And he didn't really process the death of his father until he walked away. While he was at the set of Meet the Press, he couldn't really process his father's death. But when he walked away from it, because he knew he had to walk away and figure out who he was, he then realized, the bulk of what was going on in his life and what he had lost of his father. And he talks about all that. And you can go read his book. And at the end of all this, it mentions the title of the book, or it mentions it at the beginning somewhere. It's mentioned at the beginning, but it's a phrase that his father said to him. Buddy, if we're ever separated, look for me there. So the book is called Look for Me There, if you're looking for it. So that's all I wanted to say about that part of the show. Now we have new content from our producer, who has been so kind to shoot me some new content. And I know it's here somewhere. So we had Trucker John, who was promoting us. I think we have. Okay, he's attached our video. If we froze there for a second, that was because I opened up the video on this computer. And this is where he actually promotes us, so I'll get that. So, share that. So it's up on the screen. Make that bigger. So that's Trucker John promoting our show tonight. Thank you so much, Trucker John. And we are at the end of this show. Let me double check and see, did we miss? Oh, yes, we did miss at least one topic. We have another something coming in from the producer. We have an MTG rant. Let's do that. Reads, even after all his actions solidifying himself as one of the vile men in America, they still want to come after President Trump and his family. So that is MTG's rant. Is it a video or is it just a tweet? Okay, so it's a video, so I want to move that over to the other computer. So hang on for that one, because I'll be able to manipulate it better over there if I want to stop and say something. Okay. Going, it should be going. There it is. And she's talking Hunter Biden again. So
here's what I found out this week. There is a website, you may or may not have heard about it, called Pornhub. It is a disgusting porn website. As a matter of fact, it should be illegal. I don't even know why it exists. But Hunter Biden used to have multiple accounts on this Pornhub pornography sex website. And these aren't accounts where he could go watch pornography. These are accounts where he posted his sex videos, like the ones that are on the Hunter Biden laptop. This week, I found out, you want to know what? He still has an account on Pornhub where his videos are posted.
by the way, there is no Hunter Biden laptop. There's only a hard drive that purports to be from the Hunter Biden laptop. As Hal Sparks is always reminding us, that hard drive is too big to be from the alleged laptop that it is supposed to be from, so therefore it is not from that laptop. It is merely Republican Party propaganda cooked up by people who try to do something to stop Joe Biden from being elected.
It is still live and active. This is the son of the President of the United States. Hunter Biden is the most disgusting, vile, embarrassment, piece of trash. And that is what is a reflection on our country. And
there she is projecting again. She is the disgusting, vile piece of trash that reflects on our country. Most definitely, she is.
Attacked President Trump and his family? I don't care how people vote, Republican, Democrat, Independent.
Well, part of that statement is right. She doesn't care.
Non-political, whatever. That fact right there should be so offensive to every single American that we do something about it. I am very serious when I say we have to impeach Joe Biden because he is corrupt.
Good luck with that. Actually, not good luck with that. I don't wish you luck. You shouldn't have any luck. Okay, so nothing new from the producer, but maybe something coming later. Sometimes a happy little video to throw at the end, perhaps. This is the final topic that I wanted to get to. Do we have anything? They still are running. Oops, I'm not live though. They still are running video from tonight. I don't know if there's anything left to show, but that's not the topic that I wanted to get to. This is the topic that I wanted to get to. So what day is this from? This is from yesterday. Looks like we have something new. Yeah, I bet I know what that is, producer. I bet I know what you shared, and I don't know why I didn't pick it up, but let's see if I'm right when I get to your segment. But I want to do this first. So I will make time for your segment. Don't worry. So last night, or yesterday afternoon, let's see what time is on this tweet. 7:17 p.m. Okay, so it was last evening. Elon Musk held a Twitter Spaces discussion on SpaceX's first Starship launch. When he says first Starship launch, he means Starship as a super heavy variant, meaning the full stack. Because the word Starship can mean just this part, the top part, or it can mean the whole thing. In this case, it means the whole thing. So this is what Elon Musk said. The outcome was roughly in what I expected and maybe slightly exceeding my expectations, but roughly what I expected, which is that we would get clear of the pad. So he's happy he cleared the pad. I'm glad to report the pad damage is actually quite small and should be repaired quickly. Others may disagree with his assessment. The vehicle's structural margins appear to be better than we expected, as we can tell from the vehicle actually doing somersaults toward the end and still staying intact. Others have pointed to that, saying that despite the fact that the metal is so lightweight material, that it cannot be stacked on its side and raised up the way Falcon 9 is, that it has to be stacked vertically, that despite the fact that it was flipping over itself, it didn't bend and twist the metal quite so much. From a pad standpoint, we are probably ready to launch in 6 to 8 weeks. Again, Musk has a tendency to over-exaggerate. It probably won't be that quickly, but he's going to try. The longest item on that is probably requalification of the flight termination system. It took way too long to rupture the tanks. I believe that I read one article that said it took 40 seconds to do that. Okay, there he says it. Time for ATFS to kick in was pretty long, about 40 seconds-ish. There were 3 engines that we chose not to start, so that's his explanation. So that's why Super Heavy Booster lifted off with 30 engines, which is the minimum number of engines. Now, one thing to note here is that Super Heavy does not turn on the engines at full throttle, 100%, and take off. It turns on the engines in a low state, almost, for lack of a better explanation, almost like a person properly accelerating away from the traffic light. You start out slowly, you move slowly so that you don't leave a burn in your wake. And the idea was to start the engine slowly and edge up off the pad and then build up thrust as you went. So that's why if you watch the video, you know how long it took to rise up. And I've often noted, and it's not really the same for Falcon 9, but there is a noticeable difference between Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. There's a noticeable difference between Falcon 9 and an Atlas rocket. When you watch them, particularly at night, you'll notice how slowly the Falcon 9 rises because of the difference in thrust versus the other rockets mentioned. But what he's saying, what they do is he's saying they didn't turn on 3 engines. He's disproving others' assertions that 3 engines failed immediately. He's saying they never turned them on. Okay. He says they didn't explode, but they were not healthy enough to bring them to full thrust, so they were shut down. So they loaded it with 33 engines, but I guess on the static fire, they determined that those engines were not appropriate, and it was better to balance the system and never turn them on. That's what he's saying. At T plus 27 seconds, SpaceX lost communications due to some kind of energy event, and some kind of explosion happened to knock out shields on engines 17, 18, 19, or 20. This is what other people theorize has to do with he didn't build a flame trench. And Nick's Rich 56, I'm not knocking it, okay? I'm just explaining what others have said. That he didn't build a flame trench, and that it wasn't so much the heat of the engines that broke the concrete, but rather the lack of a flame trench with a water suppression system, which reduces the noise level, which NASA uses out at pad 39A to reduce the noise level so the concrete doesn't break up from the engines. But Musk's assertion is, I'm going to take this rocket eventually to Mars. Not this particular rocket, not Starship 24 Booster 7, but a variant of Starship. He's going to take it to Mars. And on Mars, you're not going to have a flame trench built, and you're not going to have water for a water suppression system. So what Musk is saying is, I want to be able to launch this and figure out on Earth how to launch it off of Mars to return it home. He continues, rocket kept going through T plus 62 seconds with the engine continuing to run, lost thrust vector control at T plus 85 seconds. Thrust vector control, unless I'm mistaken, has to do with the dynamics of modulating this thrust on the engines to make it turn a certain way. And there's engines out of the 33 that are constantly pointing downward from the nozzle, and there's others that gimbal and move. He does, however, admit in this next statement, generated a rock tornado under Super Heavy during liftoff, but SpaceX does not see evidence that the rock tornado actually damaged engines or heat shields in a material way. May have happened, but we have not seen evidence of that. So at this point, he is disproving the theory by others that he broke up the concrete so bad that the concrete flew up and damaged parts of the rocket. Says it was actually good to get this vehicle off the ground because we made so many improvements in Super Heavy Booster 9 and beyond. Because he's got more of these, and whatever he learns with each new failure, he incorporates changes in the next version. Really just needed to fly this vehicle and then move on to the much improved booster. After AFTS, the ship did not attempt to save itself. Big thing for next start, by the way, AFTS is flight termination system. Big thing for next Starship launch is ensuring that we don't lose thrust vector control with Booster 9. We're going to putting down a lot of steel under the launch tower. We mentioned this before when I showed the video from Jessica Kirsch. So they're going to put steel underneath the launch tower, and they're going to use that to divert the flame. And he doesn't say it here, but Jessica Kirsch mentioned that they were going to have water on the steel to cool it off. So they are going to do some kind of suppression system, some kind of diversion system. Use steel instead of concrete. Then he addresses the assertion that what flew up into the air was toxic. Debris was just basically sand and rock, so it's not toxic at all. You can bet the government's going to verify that. It's just like a sandstorm, essentially, but we don't want to do that again. You know, you don't want to do that again. And there are plenty of us for whom dust is not a good thing. Sierra dust is not a good thing, so you blowing up rock and dirt and throwing it in the air is not a good thing. Makes me happy I wasn't there. We certainly didn't expect to destroy the concrete under the launch pad. Well, you didn't. I don't know if everybody that works with you did. Speculating, but one of the more plausible explanations is that we may have compressed the sand underneath the concrete to such a degree that the concrete effectively bent and then cracked, which is a leading theory. What I would say is the theory is that, you know, you created a sonic weapon and the energy of the rocket created a sonic weapon. I like that theory that someone else wrote. You know, is it accurate? Is it not? We'll have to see, because we have scientists who can evaluate the concrete, and hopefully he's using scientists that can evaluate the concrete to determine why the concrete that flew in various directions was destroyed, and, you know, figure that out. Then he explains why he's going with a steel plate. Reason going with steel plate instead of frame trench is that for payloads in the rocket, the worst acoustic environment doesn't matter to the payload since it's about 400 feet away. He just wants this thing to be loud. Flight was pretty close to what I expected. Got pretty close to stage separation. If we had maintained thrust vector control and throttled up, which we should have, then we would have made it to staging. At this point, I want to mention the fact that Starship is the only rocket, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but Starship is the only rocket that does not have a apparatus to force the stages apart. Even Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, has an apparatus to force the stages to part. Starship is supposed to perform a maneuver and naturally fall apart, and it couldn't perform the maneuver correctly because its engines didn't shut off on stage 1, the booster. So it couldn't separate stage 2, the Starship portion of Starship, from it. It couldn't get Starship 24 off of booster 7. Our goal for the next flight is to make it to staging and hopefully succeed. My expectation for the next flight would be to reach orbit. Next flight profile will be a repeat, so he's going to send it the same way. And the United States government would, any other government would not allow him to send it anywhere but through the ocean anyway. You're not going to send it over land with population. The goal of these missions is just information. Like, we don't have any payload or anything. It's just learning as much as possible. Definitely don't expect Lunar Starship under the Human Landing System project to be the longest lead item for the Artemis 2 mission. So he typical Elon Musk, says he will be ready for Artemis 3 before the Artemis 3 rocket or the SLS is ready. He thinks they'll still be building part of the SLS for Artemis 3, and he'll have his HLS done. We will be the first thing to really be ready, he says. Probably an 80% probability of reaching orbit with Starship this year. I think close to 100% change of reaching orbit within 12 months. So he anticipates to reach orbit within 12 months. He slowed down Raptor engine production. That's the engines on board, because we've got more Raptors than we know what to do with. Expects to spend $2 billion this year on Starship. We do not anticipate needing to raise funding. We don't think we need to raise funding. We'll do the standard thing where we provide liquidity to employees. But to my knowledge, we don't need to raise incremental funding for SpaceX. For the next flight, we're going to start the engines faster, because you know that I told you earlier that they started the engines at the slower lower thrust and get off the pad faster. From engine start to moving Starship was around 5 seconds, which is really long time to be blasting the pad, going to try to cut that time in half. Starship didn't get to what SpaceX thought was a safe point to do stage separation. I thought the SpaceX team did amazing work. This is certainly a candidate for hardest technical problem done by humans. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people that would disagree with you, and some of them are probably in my audience. Audience, feel free to chime in on that one. On environmental response, the rocket uses non-toxic propellants and scattered a lot of dust. It uses oxygen and hydrogen. But to the best of our knowledge, there's not been any meaningful damage to the environment that we're aware of. And then there's probably plenty of replies here. Oh, there is more to it. SpaceX is yet to make a final decision on which Starship prototype and Super Heavy booster will apply next launch. Yeah, that's typical. Going to be replacing a bunch of tanks in the tank form, but those are tanks that we wanted to replace anyway. If you saw the pictures, some of the concrete that flew hit the tanks. Tower is in good shape. No meaningful damage to tower, even though it got hit with some pretty big chunks of concrete. So apparently he built the tower pretty well. Starship sliding laterally off the launch pad was because of the engine failures. So he admits that it kind of did a lateral slide. And he plans to do another update in 3 weeks. So that was Musk on his rocket. So thank you for all. I just thought you'd want to know what he had to say, even if you don't agree with any of it or parts of it. So let's see. Here's what Elon and Mayer don't understand. Consuming something you also don't like is also free speech. This is a Bob Seska tweet. I don't know if it's a video. I'm going to send it over to the other computer. Thank you to our producer for this and the other segments. Jim the Greek expletives welcome. Yeah, Jim has plenty colorful words to say about Elon. Jim will make up for whatever I don't say. Okay, it is a video. Good. I'm glad I brought it over. Okay, so. So, free speech will be turned back on you if you're not careful.
I really can't emphasize this enough. We must protect free speech, and free speech only matters. It's only relevant when it's someone you don't like saying something you don't like, because obviously free speech that you like is
Yes,
that's easy. So it's the thing about censorship is that sure for those who would advocate it, just remember at some point that will be turned on you. I really can't emphasize this enough.
So, you know, those two are trying to say that they can say whatever they want regardless because of, you know, they're always trying to say that if they can't say whatever they want, then you're not going to get to say whatever you want at some point as well. So, you know, that's what's going on. And So there is that. And we're really at the end of the show. I know that I didn't get too involved with what the audience said tonight. If there is something you really wanted to say, and we're still looking, I mean, they are still sending me video of this mission. So it obviously has not deployed all of its payloads yet, which totally explains why they had to expend the boosters. Because I'm going to show you this, and you're going to see that video is still going on. I mean, it's an hour and 50 minutes, and it's still going on. So if you want to continue on with that, go to YouTube at SpaceX. Find the featured videos. Find the live video that is a SpaceX Falcon Heavy with VSAT-3. Or go to their Twitter account at SpaceX and see the rest of it, But I'm at the end of the show. So if y'all don't mind, I would like to end the show for tonight. I'd like to thank you very much for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank you for putting up with about 30 minutes of my other show, Slightly Off Axis podcast, at the beginning of the show. I had intended just to come on for a few minutes and do that and, introduce to my audience what the time was for the rocket launch. You're welcome, human enough being. I had just going to, mention the time and the specifics about the launch. And then I got into it and I started looking at it and I saw that they changed the time of launch. And I'm really glad we got the launch during tonight's show, because this is the first of its kind during our show where we have done live launch coverage. So, that's really spectacular to be able to do that. I will peek over here. I mean, they have like a timeline marker, but I don't see the next marker that shows that. So it seems like there's a lot more to this timeline in regard to where they're going to get this satellite into orbit. But you can see that I'm tired. I'm getting distracted. You've all been a wonderful audience, have wonderful moderators, a great producer. And I thank you so much for being here every week that we do this. And we'll be back next week with new topics. Stay safe out there. Come with more topics for next week. As always, like and subscribe, spread the show where you can. We thank the people that provided the videos for tonight's show, the shows that provided the videos for tonight's show. We thank Trucker John and HBL Radio Nation for helping disseminate the program. Okay, folks. Normally I play a video at the end. I think I'm going to forego that, and I'm just going to do a countdown timer so we can close this up so that when I make my last statement, it doesn't cut you off, because not all social media ends at the same time. So I'm just going to do a countdown timer to the end of the show. Thank you so much for coming. Bye now.